So he left for Townsville that day, and on his way up he would, when he'd stop and have a rest or whatever, get food, he'd give me a call to see how I was going. I was pretty cold to him. But he got to Townsville and he would ring me every day, and I just, kept working. And then after a couple of weeks, or a few weeks, he asked me if I'd come up to Townsville to visit him, if my daughter and I'd come up for a holiday for a week. And he said, just jump on a plane. He said, I'll pay for the motel room when you're here. And, well, he was there, and he used to have a Aboriginal guy work for him. He worked for him in Brisbane, and he was up there too working for him. So all four of us were in this two-bedroom motel room. Anyway, we stayed in this motel, and I didn't like Townsville when I first got there. I got off the plane and we sort of drove through the town. It was like, oh my God, I don't really like this place. But I got used to it, and I quite liked it. So I was there for a week, and then I flew back home to Brisbane and continued working. And then a little time passed, and he was running out of work up there a bit. So the Indigenous guy came back to Brisbane and he got some more work there. Well, then P got some more work up there. So he asked if I would go up and live there with him. But his money was pretty tight, so he moved on to his little speedboat that he had in the Ross River. And that's where my daughter and myself and him lived for a while when I first moved. Because, yes, I packed up my house and I rented it out. I rented my house out and I left everything in the house. All linen, glasses, everything in the house. And I found this really lovely young New Zealand couple who had just moved over, and they were here for 12 months or something. So they rented my house, and they were perfect tenants. My mother used to pick up the rent for me, and she was in charge of putting it in my bank account so my payments could get paid. They had to pay the electricity and phone bill themselves. It was still left in my name because I was actually supposed to be living in the house. And I moved to Townsville, and my daughter, myself and P all lived on this little speedboat for a little while. And that's where I learnt to paint, which has been a great skill for me. I have painted a lot over the years for myself and for a lot of my friends. I've painted all my life, and I love to paint. It's like a therapy thing for me, I suppose. We lived on the little speedboat, my daughter, Pete, and I. I used to fish every day because actually if I didn't fish, and mainly used to catch blue swimmer crabs. If I didn't catch crabs or fish, we hardly ate. Money was really tight. But it was such a good experience for me and for my daughter. She was quite funny. I remember one day we were walking down to the pontoon to go back onto the boat, and my daughter used to talk. She'd never shut up. And she was walking along telling me this story about something or other. I don't know what it was. And I'm going, shh, be quiet. And she wouldn't be quiet. And then all of a sudden she turned around because here was this Indigenous lady laying flat out across where she was about to walk. And in the end I grabbed her and said, look. And that frightened the hell out of her. And she eventually was quiet. But it was quite an experience living on the river because the Indigenous people used to fight and carry on between the two. And some of the things we seen, I used to cover my daughter's eyes so she didn't see it. But they were all quite funny, quite lovely. I used to give them fish. I'd clean it and fillet it and give them fish to eat. And so they were always really nice to me, which was good. After a little while on the boat, I can't remember how long it was, things started to pick up. We got a few big government contracts up there painting the Laverack Army Barracks and Kieran School and for the Department of Housing and that. We did a lot of painting and that for them. So then P contacted Kay, the Indigenous guy that used to work for him, and he came back up. So then we had to move off the boat, and so we rented a house so Kay had somewhere to live too. I used to love that man. He was so funny. But on a Friday afternoon when he'd finished work, he'd go to the pub, obviously. He'd get his pay and off he'd go. He'd put it in his pocket. And I used to say to him, you shouldn't take all that money out with him because he was getting good money. And I remember one night he went out and he'd had quite a bit to drink and he was walking through some park or something and he met this other Indigenous lady. Well, she put one hand down his pants onto his and then her hand in his pocket and rolled him and took all his money off of him. So after that, he would only take a certain amount out with him and he'd give me the rest to look after. That taught him a lesson. But he was a beautiful man. He was so funny. I really enjoyed having him live with us, and so did my daughter. She loved him. While we were painting contractors, there was P and myself and well, obviously Kay and then my daughter. So we had $5 a day that used to have to get us our lunch and breakfast and smokes. We all smoked at the same time. So that's all the money we had every day to live on. So obviously we lived very cheaply. And once again, I used to fish and catch crabs all the time to help us survive. But we met this other couple. P met them somewhere. And Brian, B and D, their names were. And he had a really nice cabin cruiser that he wanted to sell. So we had a look at it, and like it had a nice huge big bed in it and a galley and toilet and shower and a big freezer on the back and everything. And there was a deal between P and D because D needed his house painted. He said, you paint the house and that can be, a huge payment for the boat. So we agreed. But then it was my job to paint this house. P would take me over there every morning and he would sort of set up the trestles and everything for me to paint this house. So I painted 4 coats of paint around this house all by myself in summer in the heat in Townsville. And P never even put a bloody paintbrush to the walls. I don't really remember what he was doing. I know we didn't have any big contracts or anything at the time. That's why we agreed to paint the house. But he wasn't there. And I remember even B and D actually saying a few times, so where's the other part? Why is he not here painting? You're doing all the work. And they were all right about it. They were happy with the job I was doing, so they were fine. But we ended up buying the boat, and painting once again was running out. So Kay went back to Brisbane to live, and P and myself and my daughter, we all moved onto this bigger boat, which was great. And that was when we started going out. We'd go out to sea for a month on end, and we cruised all the islands and reefs around off Townsville. We fished our way around. We'd catch fish and then we'd take it back in and sell it in at the wharf. But one day when we were going somewhere in the car, I don't know, and this young kid had this little white kitten, and P stopped and said, what are you doing with that kitten? And the kid was dumping it. It wasn't going to be a nice outcome for this little kitten. So P put his arm out and said, I'll take her. So now we have the little kitten on the boat. Bubbles and Squeak, we called her. And I used to throw her over once a week over the side of the boat to make sure she didn't have fleas. And every time I'd go into the wharf, we'd go back into the wharf from out at sea, I used to bath her, but I would bath her in, food colouring. So sometimes I'd have a yellow cat and a pink cat or a blue cat, and all the fishermen on the wharf used to laugh at me and say, "Oh, Loretta, what colour cat you're gonna have this time?" And I said, "You'll just have to wait and see." It was a good life being out on the boat, out to sea. But sometimes you'd wake up in the morning and you wouldn't be able to see land, or there wouldn't be another boat around. You'd be way out to sea, and it's like, oh my God, it was kind of like an eerie feeling sometimes. We're the only people left on this earth. Where is everybody else? But you'd wake up and there'd be a flying fish flying across the front of the water, or there'd be a whale coming up somewhere, or there would be turtles popping their heads up, or whatever it was. It was always different. And we got to know a lot of the trawler guys, so we'd go and tie up with them through the day, or sometimes we'd go and work on the boats of a night time. There was these people that had a really big boat. It was like a big mothership for all the trawlers, and we'd go and work on their boat of a night time, and while the boys were sorting the tray, Julie and we would fish for sharks out the back, and it'd take the boys about an hour, I suppose, to sort the tray. But when the nets had come up, as the trawler would pull the nets off, it would be just wall to wall of sharks. So her and I used to fish out the back for sharks. And if you ever fell over there, you would just be gone. The dolphins would be jumping up in the air because they'd be cranky at the sharks and everything. But we'd catch anywhere up to 120 sharks in an hour. Just throw it in, throw it in and out, in and out. And it was a really great experience for me to do those things. We were out on Rib Reef at one stage, and I was fishing with a hand line at the front of the boat, and you could see 100 feet down. The water was crystal clear, and I had my line in there for a little while, and I thought, I'm not getting there. Something must have took my bait. So I sort of went to pull my line up, and it was a bit heavy. I thought I just had a piece of coral or something on it. So anyway, I've stood over the front of the boat looking in the water to see what I had on my fishing line as it come up. Well, it was this huge, big shark. And our boat was about 38 feet long or something, and he was over half the length of our boat. But anyway, P had jumped out because I said, I got the big shark. And I really wanted to catch the shark. And P had jumped out and got on the duckboard at the back, so his feet were in the water when the shark swam underneath his feet. But what I did was I put the hand line down on the ground and I put my foot on it so that I could put a bit of tension on it. But what had happened, as the shark swam away, it wrapped up, all the fishing line wrapped up my leg. And B was over on another boat off to the side from us a little bit, and he's screaming out to P, get a knife, she's going to lose a leg. And that was a silly thing I did, but lucky the shark didn't run. He just swam away slowly, and as he swam, it loosened tight, and I was able to get it down over my leg and off my foot. But I did have huge big welts all along the top of my leg. If he had a run, he would have either cut my leg off or taken me with him. I was really lucky that day.